Welcome to Breaking Down Bergman and our look at the 1950s. Now this was the first full decade of Ingmar Bergman that we had to watch, and that meant we had a lot of choices to pick as our favorites, and that's really what we want to do here, is kind of provide a summary for everyone who might have not watched every single one of our videos, but wants to know, what are the real highlights?
Yeah, and also to kind of chat a little bit about these 10 years in his career and the fact that there was a lot of critical acclaim that he received for a number of movies.
I think if you just talk about his first film of the decade, To Joy, and the one that followed it, This Can't Happen Here, this is of course talking about when they were released, those were both stumbles. To Joy in that it wasn't such a perfect film, and This Can't Happen Here, which was basically a disaster in every sense of the word, just not a very good Bergman film, and one that he pulled from theaters. And then we go to the end of the decade, post Wild Strawberries, post Seventh Seal, and The Magician, which in Bergman standards isn't the greatest Bergman film.
No, I agree. I think in this decade it was inevitable. He was either going to make it or he was going to have to stop, because he reached that point in his career where you're not, a young director anymore. You've been doing it for 6-7 years, and if you're still not doing it quite well, you're just not going to get funded. So he really, I think, came at it in this decade, and I think his major breakthrough was really, not only did he get more comfortable with the cinema and with the people he surrounded himself with in terms of actors and other professional cinematographers, etc., but he also really broke away from the guidelines of the film studio and of the critics and even of the audience, and he decided to make his own masterpieces, and he succeeded.
So what we really want to get down to here is the root of the decade and our favorite films of the decade.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough one.
It was a huge challenge because there's so many of them, and they're all, well, not all of them, but most of them are worth watching, and a lot of them are very good.
I think maybe we can make this easier by talking about the ones that received the most critical acclaim first. There was Brink of Life, for which he received directorial acclaim, and so did all of the actresses for their performances. Smiles of a Summer Night, The Seventh Seal, and Wild Strawberries all were festival winners as well. And that's when Bergman really started breaking into the cinema scene as a unique director, a powerhouse, an art cinema director, and really not only a person who was telling a story for entertainment, but who was really bringing a message.
But one of the ones that stood out for you came before these and was actually a relatively early Bergman that gave a sign of the direction that he was headed in.
Yes, I really enjoyed Sawdust and Tinsel. For me, that movie showed a lot of promise, but also in viewing it, I got a lot out of it, and I thought it was both challenging but entertaining, and it pulled on my emotion, and it showed me things about Bergman and his ability to direct and just the story that he kind of wanted to tell.
And it was a very complex story, a very rich story, but it wasn't just the story that was a real progression, it was also the visuals. From the moment we started that film, we knew that something had changed here.
Yeah.
It's on the heels of Summer with Monica, which in a way was a shift for Bergman as well, but Sawdust and Tinsel sort of encapsulated where Bergman was headed.
Monica was really a standout film for me too, but I feel that in Monica there was, 3 or 4 key things that stood out, whereas with Tinsel it was boom, 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 boom. Like throughout the whole film I was like, wow, he's doing something new. Wow, he's doing something else new. And it was powerful both from the cinematography, the different techniques that he was using. You could really tell he had a mastery of the entire production. I think you're right, it was complex, and maybe, I don't want to say it got away from him, but it maybe overwhelmed his audiences. I think he had a pretty good grasp of it the whole time.
I think you're on the right track because it's one of his films that's now considered underappreciated in the time, but starting to gain recognition now. And I'm going to choose one that is a little bit different for Bergman as a director, and a theme that he didn't really revisit in quite the same way ever again. That's Smiles of a Summer Night. And it's a romantic comedy, as close as Bergman gets to one at least. But I think when we saw this, it was a real pleasure to watch because it wasn't the same Bergman we had seen before. But it was. it was familiar, but it was completely different. And he set the film in a different period of time, which really gave us a bit of a distance, and we were able to sort of laugh at it in some sort of strange Jane Austen-esque way before he spun it around and made it a dark tale where everyone ended up humiliated.
I really enjoyed Smiles of a Summer Night when we first watched it because it was so frivolous and entertaining. But when we started actually discussing it, I really honed in on those dark undertones. I mean, the amount of damage that all those characters caused each other, how they broke each other's hearts with the infidelity, the different deceptions, and the ways that they tried to manipulate each other, and just the darkness and the sadness of all of that, and the utter and complete brokenness by this humiliating act of not only being betrayed, but having it publicly disclosed. It's just so crushing.
And he really drives it home, that extra way with the father and the son's relationship, where the son runs away with the father's wife. It's just a huge mess. But it's perfect Bergman.
It is perfect Bergman.
Now, our third film is one that we can both agree on. And this is a toughie because there were several that we could have chosen, and we probably could have happily agreed on here. But we picked Wild Strawberries.
I don't think that's going to be a surprise to people because despite the fact that there were quite a few strong films in this decade and quite a few that were, appealed to our personal tastes, Wild Strawberries was by far the most masterful of them all.
There was just something very pleasing about this movie, and you can revisit it many times, and like many films from Bergman, there's a lot more you can catch in a second or third viewing, but I feel like this one you don't really see any flaws.
Not from the storytelling, not from the pacing of the film, the symbolism, the cinematography. It just all worked together so well. And even some of the things that we've seen him rehearsing before but not quite getting, like the flashback, the multiple layered timelines, the dreams, the heavy symbolism with things like mirrors. They were always either heavy-handed or a little bit awkward or just lacked something. It was sometimes even difficult to put your finger on exactly what was missing. But in this film, they just worked.
One of the questions that's really been in my mind so far, especially as we've seen some of the better films of this decade, is where do I expect Bergman to go from here?
I think for me that's hard to answer because I feel like the 50s have been really unpredictable in my mind. The success that he's had, you didn't necessarily see it coming on. Like, it wasn't gradual. I feel like he shot through with some, and then he gave us a couple of consistent performances, and then he would disappoint, at least to me.
We know that what he can deliver, and we know that we've seen some of the films that have really defined him as a director entirely. We got those out of the way. We got Seventh Seal out of the way. We got Wild Strawberries out of the way. I think the question is, what movies going forward are really going to jump out? Will there be that hidden gem? That's what I really want to find.
Yeah, I don't think we'll be disappointed. I think he'll continue to break new ceilings, largely because I feel that there's two things that he's put behind him. One, this pressure to be commercial. I think he's given that up and realized that he can have commercial success without trying to be a commercial director for the masses. And the second one is this crushing self-doubt that he seemed to have at the beginning of his career, and this anxiety over himself as a director and trying to just cram and heavy handle every single production.
I agree with you, and I think that the 1960s will really give Bergman the opportunity to take those successes that we've seen and push them forward. He has a lot of options at this point. I'm interested to see what he does with them. But of course, before you get there, the 1950s offer plenty of opportunities to see his growth as a director, namely Sawdust and Tinsel, Smiles of a Summer Night, and Wild Strawberries. Those are our three picks if you only have time to watch a few.
You won't be disappointed by them.
Yeah, they're all solid efforts, and of course, watch them all if you can, and then watch our videos. I mean, it's worth it. But please join us as we move into the 1960s, and thanks for watching Breaking Down Bergman.